as I made my rounds through each hospital room. I spotted someone in the distance. Could it be a family member of the patient who was just rushed in by emergency? I approached slowly and initiated contact. "Is there something troubling you?" The man, who had been looking down, slowly lifted his gaze to meet mine. "My wife was brought here earlier, and this is all new to me. Thank you for your concern," he said with a smile. Something about his smile seemed familiar, but before I could recall where I'd seen it, he stood up and turned away from me. "I need to be strong," he said, his voice quivering slightly. "I've heard that your family member is in stable condition," I began, then paused, puzzled by my own reaction. Maybe it's because I grew up in a facility, but I've never been good at speaking to people I meet for the first time. Whether it's patients or their families, I tend to become too formal. Yet, with this man, words flowed easily. For some reason, I had this feeling that continuing our conversation might lead to something incredible. Whether it was a good or bad feeling, I couldn't say. "If you need anything, the nurse's station is over there." As I was about to return to my rounds, the man stopped me. Could it be Jody? How did he know my name? Staring at me in disbelief, he stepped closer. "Don't you remember? It's been so many years. I've turned into an uncle now." I began to trace my memories back. Could it be me, returning home after work? Passing by a hair salon, I remembered it was almost time to get my hair cut. When was my next day off? I wondered. Always tying my hair up because of work, I found going to the salon more of a chore. No family, no friends. For someone who has lived like me, grooming was never of any interest. Simple, clean. That was all I sought in fashion. Jody, that's my name, but the parents who gave it to me are no longer here. During a family outing in my kindergarten years, they died in an accident. Although I survived, I was treated as a burden by relatives. Never properly clothed or fed. Children listen more than adults think. Why do we have to take care of her? Our household is already struggling. We can't afford another child. Hearing adults talk like this, I started to feel like I shouldn't exist. Eventually, I was placed in a facility, but by then, I had already become a child lacking self-confidence. Always hiding, watching, living as told by others. Even now, expressing my feelings is hard. That's why I struggle with relationships at work. However, nursing is the only thing that gives my life purpose. No matter how tough it gets, I can't imagine leaving this job. Once inspired by a nurse. I've always dreamed of being like her. I haven't forgotten that aspiration. To be kind and see people for who they are. Though that's what I wish. Reality is often unkind. Growing up without knowing love, maybe dreams are just dreams for me. Just as I start to feel down, I snap back to reality. I was just thinking about making a hair appointment. Spending a lot of time alone, my days lack meaningful conversations. It seems I tend to overthink because of this. As I linger in front of the salon, pedestrians seem to walk around me. I decided to head home quickly to check on my days off. Regaining my composure, I made my way home. After checking my days off, I made an appointment with a hair salon online. I took a bath, then heated up some side dishes I had prepared on my day off. Relaxing at the mini table in my cramped one-room apartment is my favorite time. After fiddling with my mobile phone for a while, I did the dishes and crawled into bed. Tomorrow is a night shift. Before then, I'll go shopping and stock up on prepared dishes. I live a frugal and modest life, by choice. That's what I've always wanted. I had to take out student loans to attend nursing school. The inheritance left by my parents was gone, just keeping up with daily expenses. The relatives who considered me a burden and sent me to a facility were certainly not going to pay for my tuition. I didn't want to be indebted to them for anything. I've been repaying my student loan since I started working as a nurse, so I don't have any savings even now. But borrowing money was essential to achieving my dream. I still find fulfillment in my job and have no regrets about that. Plus, I've always been a simple person, so a modest lifestyle suits me just fine. Lost in thought again, I eventually fell asleep. Waking up the next day, I went shopping as planned. I bought discounted groceries at the supermarket, deciding what to make with them. I've been used to this lifestyle since I started living on my own after leaving the facility. There's no need to make anything fancy since I'm not cooking for anyone else. After quickly finishing shopping, I started cooking as soon as I got home. Even though there's some time for a nap during the night shift, I still wanted to rest a bit before that. Once everything was made and cleaned up, it was just past 1 p.m. when I checked the clock. My shift starts at 5 p.m., so considering commute time, I had about 2 hours to spare. After eating some of the dishes I made earlier, I lay down in bed. I played relaxation music from a video site and closed my eyes. This moment was my relaxation time. As I dozed off listening to the music, I dreamt someone was talking to me. Apparently a woman. I could tell she was smiling kindly, but her face was blurry. As a child, I reached out and took the woman's hand. It felt like my heart was slowly warming and melting away. I tried to remember who she was from the depths of my memory, but couldn't identify her. Yet, I wanted to stay in that dream forever. Eventually, the woman's presence faded, and I felt like I was floating on clouds, enveloped in a pleasant atmosphere. This feels good. As I thought that, a distant sound reached me. It was my mobile phone's alarm, bringing me back to reality. Groggily checking the screen, I saw it was 3:30 p.m. Right. I realized I had been napping and noticed my eyes were wet. It seemed I had cried in my dream, but now I couldn't even remember what the dream was about. Stretching and shifting my mindset, I started preparing to go to work. Good evening. I arrived at work and greeted my daytime colleagues. They all greeted me back, but it was all business. After handing over the shift, the daytime colleagues left. Today, we're having a party with people from a trading company. I watched them leave, dressed in their fancy outfits, and then one of my fellow night shift workers approached me. It must be nice. I wish I could have gone too, but it's irrelevant to Jody, right? She threw a blatant sarcasm my way. I responded with a laugh, and she sighed. I've become an outlet for the young nurse's stress. Dismissed on unrelated topics, talked behind my back about my belongings or how I dress. During work, they find reasons to dump their tasks on me. Not resisting, I've become even more of a target for some. Even the head nurse scolded me. Don't let the young ones walk all over you. You need to stand up for yourself. But it's easier for me to just go along with what I'm told, given my personality. After finishing checking temperatures and changing IV drips for the patients in each room, I approached a young nurse to take a break. While eating my homemade soup, how stingy can you be? Look, Jody was raised in a facility, right? Maybe that's related. They were talking behind my back again. I'm used to being judged by others as unfortunate because of my circumstances. Let those who want to talk, talk. I'm happy to be in the profession I've always admired. I'm not strong enough to truly believe that, and I feel out of place. I quickly finished my meal and went outside for some fresh air. The outside air was cold. It calmed my emotions. Unable to gauge distances with others, I've always chosen to be alone. Interacting with anyone scared me. It was easier to close off my heart and stay alone than to express my feelings and build relationships. Being accustomed to being talked about behind my back isn't true even now. I didn't choose to grow up in a facility, and I have feelings too. But I've never been able to find my own worth. Even if I stood up to those talking behind my back, who would acknowledge me? It would only serve to alienate me further. So, it's better to pretend I don't hear it. It hurts less to comply with others' demands, ignoring my own will. That's how I've lived since childhood. I wish they'd just leave me alone. Looking up at the night sky, I sighed and decided to return to my duties. When I came back from my break, the nurse's station was bustling. It seems an emergency patient had been brought in. I helped secure an available bed and prepared for the patient to be smoothly transferred to their room. A few hours later, the patient was finally settled into their room. After the treatment, they seemed to be sleeping. Their condition appeared stable, so we returned to our respective duties, checking on the sleeping patients for any irregularities, replacing IV drips. As I made my rounds through each hospital room, I spotted someone, sitting on a sofa near the water and hot water dispenser. Apparently not a patient, given their casual attire. Probably a family member of the patient who was just brought in. I approached slowly and initiated contact. "Are you a family member of the person who was just brought in?" The man slowly lifted his gaze to meet mine. "Is there something troubling you?" The man looked down again, muttering a soft, no, before looking up at me and responding with a laugh. "My wife was just brought here, and this is all new to me. I was a bit overwhelmed. Thank you for your concern." He smiled. Something about his smile seemed familiar, but before I could remember, he stood up and turned his back to me. "I need to be strong." His voice trembled slightly. "Your family member is currently sleeping, and I've heard their condition is stable. We are always here to support our patients and their families with compassion." I stopped mid-sentence, struck by a curious thought. I've never been good at speaking with people I'm meeting for the first time. Be it patients or their families, I always end up being too formal. Yet, with this man, words just flowed out of me. When I suddenly got stuck, the man turned back to me and looked into my eyes. I don't know what to say, but please, leave your family members' care to us, and please, don't overdo it. I had this feeling that continuing our conversation might lead to something unbelievable. Whether it was a good or bad feeling, I couldn't tell. I just knew I didn't want to change my current situation. The fear of it made me want to leave this place quickly. If you need anything, the nurse's station is over there." As I was about to return to my rounds, the man stopped me. Could it be Jody? Had he seen my name tag? My name was unexpectedly called out. I turned back towards the man. Could it be Jody? How did he know my name? Seeing me stand there dumbfounded, the man approached. Then he glanced between the pen in my pocket and my face. "Jody, right? This pen. Lenore gave it to you as a present. I remember because I was there when she bought it." His expression brightened instantly. "Huh? Lenore?" The name struck a chord with me. "Don't you remember? How many years has it been? I've become an uncle now." My memory traced back. Lenore. Among the relatives who took care of me, she was the only one who treated me kindly. She was the reason I chose nursing. Could it be? Lenore had a boyfriend at the time, and they often took me out with them. It's Ethan. We used to hang out together, remember? Memories of those times started flooding back. Before I was placed in a facility. In the 3rd grade, I stayed at Lenore's house. Her parents were cold to me, but Lenore was always kind. Her boyfriend, Ethan, would come over to help with my homework. They even took me to an amusement park on a day off. Lenore was training to be a nurse. Ethan was aiming to be a teacher, and I aspired to be like them. Then, there was a day I fell ill with a high fever. Aunt and uncle looked grim. They strictly told me not to pass it to Lenore. In my dazed state, I vaguely remembered. Right, there was an important test coming up. Lenore was preparing for her nursing license exam. It made sense why Aunt and Uncle wanted to keep me away. But as a child suffering through an unfamiliar high fever, I couldn't help feeling resentful about my life. How long had it been? Lying sick, I had no sense of time. Then, I heard the noisy sound of someone running up the stairs. Aunt was shouting something from below, but my ears were too muffled to make it out. Then, Lenore burst into my room, panting. Jody, are you okay? She peered at my face with a look close to tears. Yeah. My head was too fuzzy to articulate properly. I remember being told by Uncle and Aunt not to get close to Lenore. Trying to move a bit away from her, my joints ached. Seeing me struggle in the blanket, she said, It must be hard. And contrary to my feelings, her hand soothingly stroked my head. It felt incredibly comforting. From outside the door, Aunt called out to Lenore. Lenore, come out this instant. You know it would be terrible if you caught it with your exam coming up. Lenore sighed, smiled at me, and yelled back as she opened the door. Mom, I'm trying to become a nurse. Aunt was taken aback by Lenore's unusually loud voice. I know that, Aunt faltered. How can I ignore a child suffering right in front of me? What kind of nurse would that make me? Her forcefulness left Aunt speechless. I'll take care of my own health. Let me take care of Jody right now. Perhaps realizing she had been too harsh, Lenore spoke to Aunt in her usual gentle tone. All right, but don't overdo it. With that, Aunt went downstairs. Sorry for raising my voice when you're feeling unwell. Lenore was back to her usual self. Lenore, I'm sorry. I felt guilty for causing an argument with Aunt on my account. And the thought of possibly infecting her with my cold only made my headache worse. It's okay. Look, I brought pudding for you, she said, taking out 2 puddings from a plastic bag and smiled. Let's eat them together. Supported by Lenore, I sat up. The cold pudding was a balm to my feverish body, and I remember it being delicious. Lenore, who took care of me at her own expense, passed her national exam and became the nurse she always wanted to be. After Lenore left home, I was moved to another household, so I lost touch. But the kindness and warmth she showed me stayed with me. That's when I started aspiring to be a nurse. To be a nurse who could sacrifice her own comfort to be close to her patients. With that in my heart, I've come this far. Jody? Lost in the revived memories, Ethan's voice brought me back. Sorry. I never thought I'd meet you here. Looking closer, there were indeed traces of the Ethan I remembered. It's been 30 years, huh? Ethan's eyes were moist. When Lenore wakes up, could you let her see your face? I nodded quietly, and Ethan, reassured, went home to fetch some things for the hospital stay. While on my rounds, I visited Lenore's room. She seemed to be sleeping, but it was definitely her, Lenore, my role model. I never imagined we would meet again like this. I wonder how I appeared to her now that she's awake. A mix of hope and anxiety swirled within me. After finishing my night shift, I went home and took a short nap. I had a hair appointment scheduled for the afternoon. I've been keeping the same hairstyle for years, just trimming my grown-out hair, but this time I decided to change it. Worried that Ethan recognized me, but Lenore might not, I opted for the same hairstyle I had in elementary school. I decided to cut my long hair into a bob. It's been years since I've had my hair this short. My shoulders felt lighter, and somehow, my mood brightened too. The next day at work, I immediately heard the young nurses whispering about my haircut. Some even asked me directly why I cut it, but I just gave a vague response and focused on my duties. Soon, it was time to change Lenore's IV drip. Entering her room, Ethan noticed me and gave me a look. Nervously, I approached her. "Lenore, the nurse is here for you," Ethan called out, and Lenore turned towards me. Our eyes met and my heartbeat quickened. It was definitely Lenore. I had seen her sleeping face, but now, making direct eye contact stirred something in me. I looked away and started changing the IV drip. "I'm going to change your IV drip now," I said, reaching for the nearly empty bag. Then, "Jody?" She called out in the same gentle voice as back then. Tears welled up in my eyes. "It is Jody." Both Lenore and Ethan smiled warmly. How? How did you know it was me?" It had been 30 years since we last met, and I had aged into a middle-aged woman. I heard from Ethan about meeting someone from the past, plus there were hints of the old you. I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't changed my hair to how it was back then. Sensing my thoughts, Lenore continued. "It's not just the hairstyle." She glanced at my chest. I remember that pin well. The pin in my pocket, remembered by Ethan too, seemed to shine. The pin was a cute character-themed one, not really suiting my plain self. It had been the subject of ridicule by my colleagues time and again. "You're so plain. Why is that pin the only cute thing about you? It doesn't suit you." Despite the ridicule from colleagues, I never parted with it. It was a precious gift from Lenore, a reminder of my dream to become a compassionate nurse like her. The ink no longer flowed. Yet, I kept it in my pocket as a sort of lucky charm. "Thank you for treasuring it." And Lenore, supported by Ethan, sat up. "To think you've become such a splendid nurse." Tears welled up in Lenore's eyes, too. "I'm still far from it. I became a nurse admiring you, but I'm nowhere near good enough." Lenore gently took my hand. "That's not true. Do you remember the promise we made?" I nodded. When Lenore left home, we promised each other I would become a compassionate nurse like her, and she would remain my nursing idol. We vowed to meet again as nurses. Thank you for fulfilling our dream of becoming a nurse. I've worked hard too. Lenore shared her journey since then. After starting her nursing career, she returned home only to find I was gone. She had planned to take me in once she was settled, but by then I was moved to another relative's house, and soon after to another home. It became difficult to track me down, and she regretted it deeply. "I should have taken you with me when I left." She apologized with a sad look. I squeezed her hand back. She then shared about marrying Ethan. They were childless, but she had risen to the rank of nursing director. I was speechless, only managing to nod. She then pulled out a pin identical to mine from the side table drawer. I've kept it as a lucky charm, too. I always believed we'd meet again. Overwhelmed with joy, I hugged Lenore. Could there have been a moment as heartwarming as this? Ethan gently stroked our backs as we embraced. After finishing Lenore's IV drip change, I returned to the nurse's station where the head nurse scolded me. You know better than to bring personal matters to work, especially not as a senior nurse. The young nurses behind tried to stifle their laughter. Indeed, the head nurse was right upon reflection. Saying my sincere regret, she didn't pursue it further. If it was such a moving reunion, I won't say more, but be careful going forward. Leaving those words behind, the head nurse returned to her duties. Usually when I get scolded for making a mistake, I'd feel down and sulk, but for some reason, now I felt motivated to keep trying. I believe this positive feeling came from my reunion with Lenore. After finishing my shift that day, I visited Lenore again as a personal visit. When I told her about being scolded by the head nurse, she laughed. I would have scolded you too. Sorry. Lenore apologized. It was only with her that I could laugh about my mishaps. No matter how much time had passed, I realized she was the only person I could depend on like this. A few days later, Lenore was discharged. I, as a nurse, saw her off, but Ethan handed me a small folded piece of paper as he was leaving. The head nurse was watching closely to ensure I didn't mix personal matters with work again, but since Lenore was talking to the head nurse, we left the ward unnoticed. During a break, I opened the paper Ethan had given me, which had Lenore's contact information and address. It was written small. Be sure to contact me. The address was within walking distance from where I lived. How come we never crossed paths, living so close by? I smiled bitterly at fate's mischief. A year later, I was hurrying home from work. Today was Ethan's birthday party. Lenore was waiting with delicious food. Since then, I had started visiting their home often. Ethan had suggested, "Why don't we live together?" But Lenore and I refused. We both understood the erratic nature of our jobs. Even I hesitate around you sometimes. I wouldn't want Jody to feel that way, Lenore had said. Ethan was disappointed, but he brightened up when I expressed how happy this thought made me. Then let's all live together once we retire, he proposed, and Lenore and I laughed, sharing a look. Ethan, surprised by our reaction, couldn't help but be endearing on his birthday. We planned to celebrate it wholeheartedly. After toasting together, Lenore asked about my recent work. Since reuniting with her, the backtalk and scapegoating from colleagues had decreased. It turned out Lenore and the nursing director at my hospital were classmates, and after my colleagues found out, they kept their distance. Mixing personal matters, Lenore's doing it too, right? I joked. Do you not realize it yourself? She countered with a question. Puzzled, she then explained with a gentle smile. Since reuniting with her, my expressions have become richer. This change had positively impacted my image at work, which had been rather gloomy, according to our nursing director. I felt embarrassed. Indeed, since I started visiting them, I had been looking forward to each day, counting down to when I could visit again and finding motivation in work for those days. I never imagined being evaluated in such a manner. And although I had been far from promotion, talks of becoming a supervisor had started. Actually, I had another piece of news I hadn't shared with them yet. After hearing my story, they teased me, which made me blush. Since reuniting with her, a doctor from the same hospital had asked me out. My work and personal life had suddenly brightened, thanks to them. Expressing my gratitude, Lenore said. It's a quality you've always had. Ethan, eager to contribute, chimed in. All right, since Jody has been reborn. Wondering what he would suggest, Lenore and I excitedly focused on Ethan. Let's make today the birthday of the new Jody. Ethan raised his glass high. Lenore and I followed suit, and we toasted together. Happy birthday.